Okay, so we are doing absolute value equations. We're keeping it pretty basic today, but then tomorrow we go into inequalities, which takes it up just a little bit. So today we're going to keep it pretty basic to start slow, but tomorrow it does get a little more. So absolute values. I know one thing that when I first started teaching these, I wanted to truly understand what they meant to help you make sense of it. So absolute values means your distance from 0. So for example, so here's my 0. If I say the absolute value of -5 and the absolute value of +5, well, here's -5 and here's +5. It's your distance from 0. So from 0 to -5, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 away. That's why it's +5. Can you ever have a negative distance? No, even if you're digging underground, you're like, oh, I'm digging 3 feet underground. Like, you don't say, oh, -3 feet. That's weird. We don't say negative distances. So anytime you're asked a distance, which is what absolute values means, that's why the absolute value bars cancel your negatives. Y'all remember that? How absolute values cancel your negatives? Okay, so if I ask for the absolute value of +5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's also 5. So the absolute value of -5 and +5 are both 5. Make sense? Okay, so solving absolute values, there are some steps. We're going to write the steps together first, and then we're going to go through the steps. So first things first, the way to get absolute value bars in your calculator is math, right? I probably shouldn't use an arrow here. 1. So to get the absolute value bars in your calculator, it's math, right? 1. Okay, and I'll show y'all that in just a second. Okay, so step 1 is to get absolute value alone. So if we look at number 1, here's my absolute value. Is it alone on the left side of the equal sign? Is there any plus or minuses outside of the absolute value? Any multiplication or division outside of the absolute value? No. So it's already alone. Step 1's done. So step 2, you have to rewrite twice. So you have to rewrite the equation twice. The first time you're going to rewrite it exact, and the second time you're going to equal the opposite. And both of these are with no absolute value bars. So I'm going to show you what I mean by that. So if we look at number 1, we're going to rewrite it once exact, 3x minus 2 equals 5. See how there's no absolute value bars, but I wrote it exactly the same without the absolute value bars? So then the second time I rewrite it, 3x minus 2, it equals the opposite. What's the opposite of 5? -5. That's what I mean by step 2. So we rewrite it twice without absolute value bars, once exact, once equal to the opposite. Everybody okay with that? So then step 3, which we'll go back up there in a second, is solve both. So we're going to solve both. And then step 4, check your work, which is super simple to do in our calculator. So we'll talk about that as well. So those are your steps. So now let's complete our steps on number 1. We've already done half of them, 1 and 2. So let's do 3 and 4. So how do I solve this first one on the left? Yeah, I'm trying to get x by itself, so I'm going to add 2 to both sides. And I get 3x equals 7. Now what? Divide both sides by 3. So that cancels, and I get x equals 7/3. Now, if you like to divide it in your calculator, 7 divided by 3, it gives me, what did I do? My bad. It gives you a repeating decimal. Anytime you get a repeating decimal, you have to leave it as a fraction. Okay? Now, if you got 7.3 with no repeating, you could write 7.3 and I'd be okay with that. Does that make sense? But if you have a repeating decimal, do not write, don't do that. Don't round, write it as a fraction. Okay, so let's solve the other side. So we have plus 2 plus 2. 3x equals -3. divide by 3, divide by 3, and I get x equals -1. Now, to check your work, y'all, you're just typing it into the equation. So I'm going to hit math right 1, and I have 3 times x. Well, I can have x as 7 divided by 3. I just wrote it as division instead of a fraction to save time. Minus 2, and what do I want it to equal? +5. Did it work? So then, therefore, we check this one. It is a solution. Now let's check -1. You can hit second, enter. Do you see how it retypes what I just had? And I can go back, and I can type -1 and then delete the extra piece. And that way you don't have to retype everything. Did it also equal 5? So did we do it correctly? Yes. And then the way you write your final answer is you're going to put it in braces. That's what these are called. A lot of times teachers call them fancy brackets. I don't care what you call them, but they look something like that. I won't say exactly like that because I'm not good at them. And you write it least to greatest. So which answer is smaller? -1, 7/3. Any questions with that? When checking your work, please make sure you use the absolute value bars. If you don't, one of these is going to equal -5, but the absolute value of -5 is +5, so it's still correct. Yes? Okay. Any questions on number 1? Y'all can say yes. Yes or no? Did you just say yes because I said yes? Okay, number 2. Number 2 is weird. If you have more than one absolute value, we're just going to focus on one. I always pick the one on the left because that's where I want to focus. I don't know. You can pick the one on the right. Doesn't matter. So I'm going to focus on the left. Is the absolute value on the left alone? Yeah. Okay, so then we're going to rewrite it. We're going to rewrite it once exact. 5x plus 3 equals 3x plus 25. So there's my first rewrite, and then my second rewrite, I'm going to equal the opposite. So 5x plus 3. What's the opposite of 3x plus 25? It's going to be -3x minus 25. See how I made them both opposite? The left side, the one we focus on, always stays the same. It's only what's after the equal sign that changes. Okay? Now we solve both. When I look on this side, I have absolute values and constants on both sides. Not absolute values, good lord. I have variables is what I meant to say. Okay, doesn't matter which one I move first, but I like to move my smallest variable first, so -3x, -3x, and that leaves me with 2x plus 3 equals 25. And now does it look just like number 1 pretty much? Yeah, add or subtract and then divide. So I'm going to do -3, -3. And I get 2x equals 22. Divide by 2, divide by 2. I get x equals 11. Any questions with what I just did? Okay, so let's do the same thing on the right. What are you going to move first? I like to move my smallest variable first, so add 3x to both sides. And I get 8x plus 3 equals -25. Now what? 8x equals -28. Divide both sides by 8. I'm always in the habit of leaving things as fractions, so I'll do alpha y equals enter, -28 divide 8, which gives me a simplified fraction. But if you just like to divide -28 divided by 8, does this give me a prettier decimal than the other one? So if you rewrite this one as a decimal, is that okay? Yeah, so a lot of y'all like to rewrite as decimals. So we get -3.5. So then if I were to check my work, the difference on this one is you have to plug it into both sides and they both have to equal the same thing. So I'm just going to do one of them with you and I'm going to promise you we did it correctly. So math right 1, if we do 5 times 11 plus 3, it gives me 58. And if I do math right 1, 3 times 11 plus 25, I plugged it into both sides. Are those two sides equal? Yes. So did we do it correctly? Yes. And then if we check this one, it will also be correct. And remember, we write them least to greatest. So negative 3.5, comma 11. Now looking at number 3, my question is this. If absolute value bars represent distance, can you ever get a negative?
No.
Is distance ever negative? No. Now, is my absolute value alone first? We should always check that. If my absolute value is alone and it equals a negative, then y'all, it's no solution. We like these because we're done. Because if I ever ask you a distance, are you ever going to give me a negative?
No.
No. Distance is never negative. Because remember, absolute value bars represent distance. Any questions so far? Okay, so last one together. Is my absolute value alone? So before we do any separating and solving, we have to get our absolute value alone. We're almost treating this like it says negative 4x plus 6. How would I solve for x? So how would I solve for this green piece? We're not going to distribute because I can't put numbers into an absolute value. So what do we get rid of first if this said negative 4x plus 6? Yeah, we get rid of the plus 6. How do I get rid of plus 6? I would subtract 6 from both sides. And I get negative 4 times the absolute value of 2x minus 3 equals negative 4. Now, is my absolute value alone? Now, I know it equals a negative, but I cannot compare, I cannot tell you no solution until my absolute value is alone. What do I still have with my absolute value? A negative 4. This is technically multiplying. How do we get rid of multiplication? Divide. So if I divide this side by negative 4, I also have to divide this side by negative 4. Well, now they cancel, and I'm left with the absolute value of 2x minus 3 equals, what's negative 4 divided by 4? 1. Positive 1, right? So this is why you have to get it all the way alone before you stop. Because right here, we could have been like, oh, no solution, it equals a negative. But it wasn't alone yet. Yes? Okay, so be careful with that. So now we have our absolute value alone. We rewrite it exact. And then we rewrite it equal to the opposite. 2x minus 3 equals negative 1. Bless you. And we solve them both. So how do I solve these? Okay. What do I do?
Plus 3.
Plus 3. And I get 2x equals 4. Divide both sides by 2, and I get x equals 2. Same concept, plus 3, I get 2x equals 2. Divide by 2, I get x equals 1. Now, one thing that is a little different on this one, anytime you're checking your work, I want you to plug it into the original. Okay, this is the original, yes? So I would type negative 4, math right 1, and then I would type 2 times, we'll pick 2, minus 3, come out from the absolute value bars and put plus 6, and what should it equal?
It should equal
2. Did it work?
Yes.
And again, we can hit second enter, go erase that 2 and put a 1. Did that also work? So we did it correctly, and my answer is 1, 2 inside fancy brackets. You'll notice I'm not using parentheses. I'm using fancy brackets. Yes?
Yes.
Okay, one more thing before I let y'all finish on your own. There's only 6 problems. But like I said, tomorrow we are going to take it up a notch with inequalities. Look at number 4. This is the main one that's been giving people a hard time. Okay, so what's my first step? No, not yet. Not yet. My absolute value is alone, so I have to rewrite it. So I'm going to rewrite it exact.
Oh, yeah, after that you have to.
And then I'm going to rewrite it equal to the opposite, so equal to negative 7. Because that divide by 3 is inside the absolute value bars, so that whole thing is your absolute value. How do I solve this? I have to multiply both sides by 3. This is the biggest thing I'm seeing, y'all. Y'all are setting it. I don't know what I was about to do there. Y'all are setting it up correctly. We know that the 3's cancel. If I cancel these 3's, should I also multiply the top? No, I am literally seeing so much of that. And people will tell me 6x minus 15. Don't do that. You canceled it. If you cancel it, are you still going to use it?
No.
No. So be super careful with that one. That's really the biggest mistakes I've seen. If you have questions, what should you do?